there's a game that I've been privy to some of their conversations where they were able to essentially get funding for the majority of the title before talking to a publisher. So they're basically, the conversation would be more like finishing funds or marketing support more than just financing, which it's amazing how much that changes the dynamic versus
Massively so.
Our game is dead in the water from day one without a publisher's backing.
Yeah.
Wait, are you saying
there's a lot of different shapes for sure.
Which is more standard? I would have thought that dead in the water without a publisher would be more normal.
I think so. It's also, especially if it's remotely, decent team size and has heavy costs associated.
It can be weird in indie, because games can be very cheap to make. So a lot of indie games obviously don't cost much money to actually do the development, and a team can either self-fund itself or just they have day jobs or whatever, right? A lot of the smaller stuff just starting out. But then the flip side of that as well is, if your game's a hit, then you have a lot of money flow into your company accounts, and maybe you don't need money for the next game, but you do want the marketing support, or a platform holder would prefer it if you had a publisher, or you want to do XYZ. There's lots of other reasons for a more established indie to work with a publisher than just the money. The money's money's boring. Money is money. Money is something you need, but in a lot of situations you don't need it either, because you're making something small enough that you don't need it, or you've done well enough with previous games that you've got a little bit of budget knocking out.
What would you consider to be a cheap game? What does that mean?
It's entirely relative, right?
I don't know the budget of SMS's games. I have no concept, but hundreds of millions?
Trillions.
I have no idea. It's a lot of money. But I have no... What is it?
SMS would be 100 million.
I would think so.
You're
not going to tell me that, but...
That's an expensive project.
Yes, but then what would be
the upper
considered
end.
cheap but still possible?
It really it's fundamental. I'm not being difficult. It fundamentally, it's there's weird. So there's banding. So the easiest way to answer your question is there's banding, which is often unspoken among developers and publishers. But you've basically got you've got 0 to 100 grand, and I'm going to use dollars, I think, for now, just because that's easier. So $0 to $100,000 is your small. That's a small indie. Okay. Probably they're working from home. Maybe it's a small group of people, a couple of contractors at the higher end of that. They're doing their thing, right? They're in that kind of zone, or we've made games in that price range. That the little smaller projects we do between the bigger ones, right? Those that's one range. Then 100 to 500 is usually the kind of range of indie game where you're thinking of where you've got an indie publisher. So 100 to 500 would be where I would guess a lot of Devolver games exist, or
that's where Annapurna's
or Team 17 games. Annapurna is definitely the upper end of that, and probably higher.
Oh, really?
So then you get, I would guess so. I don't know those budgets.
I can tell you, I don't have access to numbers, but there's no chance in hell that Pathless was made for $500,000.
So Pathless exists in a really interesting space, because you've got basically then above the 500 grand mark, you've got so $500,000 to about 2-3 million, which is the kind of space that I don't know, more established indies tend to work. That's the kind of price range that I occupy, maybe a bit more, but that kind of general area. Pathless would have been, my guess, with no knowledge of the process, would be Pathless was probably edging up to 4 or 5, maybe even more, actually, in fairness.
I know that Journey cost about 7.
So Journey was unique because that's a Sony project, so there would have been lots more money bouncing around on Journey than you would see on... Journey is indie in an artistic sense and in a creative sense,
but it's published.
The budget's
so
very...
weird.
It's a published game.
But
what's
then,
interesting...
With
Journey, what's interesting is then after
also
that
number may not be
3-4
accurate. I just feel like I remember that from a GDC talk.
No, I would buy that. I would 100% buy that. And to be honest, Pathless probably goes above where I'm at. What's interesting in the indie space is at the kind of 4 million-ish to about... Used to be 10 million, it's probably now edging towards 15 million. It's really hard to get funding in that range, because that's the range where you're spending so much money that obviously it's a big investment, but probably you're not hitting a quality bar where the publisher's going to see the return on that investment. You're not going to blow people away with your visuals.
15 million so can't compete with 100 million the way that
and that's where
and then we
get out of
can.
Exactly. 500,000 you'll see a return on if it's a great game. 15 million, or sorry, let's put it in the middle, like 8-9 million, the kind of journey range from what you're saying, Austin. That's a tricky one. If you're
it only works because the game is so
target,
short. Also, they're able to go fidelity for a very small experience,
and you can mobilize the entire Sony process for that, and also crucially, that's a team that, and yourself included, who have a massive amount of respect going in. So you also have ancillary products. They know they're going to be able to sell the record. They know they're going to have merchandising. Like, it's that kind of thing. So yeah, that's a really interesting thing with the indie space, where once you go kind of 5 million plus to about 10 to 15, that's kind of a no man's land in the indie space. There are games that are made in that space, but it's much less populated. And then on the other side of that, you start to get into the AA and
it's the same in movies where you've got,
then it just goes up to ridiculous.
Like the $5 million to $10 million movies where you have like Jordan Peele, but there used to be the bread and butter in the 90s. You think of like, a standard like Steven Seagal action movie or a Julia Roberts romantic comedy or so. Those all averaged 35, 40 million, 50, if it was like a special movie. And then those rare, Titanic or Jurassic Park, but even Jurassic Park was like probably barely 100 million for its time, where they were way above the average. But the meat and potatoes of the industry was that, and over time it's become that's the highest risk category by far.
Because the cheaper category.
It's the middle.
That's the thing.
It's the thing. It's the middle.
Yeah.
Because the really
if you're
cheap
make an
is like
investment,
5 million or whatever in movies.
If you're going to make an investment, invest like $10 or 100 million, because both of those you're going to see a great return on your investment.
The middle, no guarantee you're taking.
The middle doesn't make sense. Like this is something that just normal people like us who like think in like the kinds of numbers we think of in our day-to-day lives. Like,
I still don't. When you tell me something's 5 million, my brain can't even process what that means.
Yeah, these numbers don't make any sense to human minds, right?
No.
But that's my point. Is like for us, it's like no, I'm gonna, and this causes so many issues across the world. But when we think about money and saving and putting work in and all of this stuff, actually, it's just much easier to rock up with a big bag of money. And that's where the investment side of it comes in. Is it doesn't make sense to invest. It doesn't make sense to invest 30 million in a movie that's going to be a romantic comedy that might hit or miss, when you can put 100 million into something that you can throw marketing behind that's kind of too big to fail, and you'll get a return. And even if you don't, screw it. You make 2 of those instead of 6 of the 30 million, and you're still going to have a hit. And the highest hit a romantic comedy can achieve is still lower than the highest hit your big franchise blockbuster can hit. So it's a weird, there's a weird kind of empty space in the middle. And that's where, and it's true. I mean, if literally just think about it now, like think about indie games that you have been massively impressed by, chances are those indie games are either made for nothing, basically, or a very small number, or they are in the kind of 3 to 5 million range in most cases.
So,
and I'd say the ones that make more money are probably at the lower end.
Yeah, like
something
Dead
like
Cells.
Among Us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
A couple of things. One, Troy, we basically just started this conversation and just streamrolled right into it. We haven't missed anything. We just arrived here real fast. It was like 2 minutes, maybe.
Troy, your hair is fantastic,
Jesus
man. Your hair looks great.
I take off for a few
wouldn't,
weeks, and I come in. It's like you guys are having a real conversation. I wanted to come and be like, I
This
just
show
had a
has
protein
changed.
shake and my tummy feels weird. Like, that's the sensibility I'm bringing to this conversation.
Second, I was
guys
going to
talk
ask,
about-
when we talk about how much video games cost, is the bulk of that salaries? When you talk about this, like when they talk about GTA costs this much to make, is that largely paying people? Or is it also marketing? Like, I don't actually know what that necessarily means.
So generally, it's like it's
all going to Troy.
A lot like movie. It's all going to Troy. Yeah, if you've got Troy in your game, like 50% of your budget.
Not
is just
all of
Troy.
it, but a majority.
The other
of it.
50% is the food you have to order in for Troy.
Yeah,
Yes.
I have
Very
to stay
very
above the
strong taste.
line. Therefore, I must
Yeah, yeah,
be.
He must have an espresso in every room.
That's right. And he doesn't drink them. He just likes the smell.
Did I tell you?
He's
Hold
Abigail
on.
Breslin in.
Are you calling me out?
No,
We're calling you out.
It was a guess. Did I accidentally call
story.
you out?
Kinda. So true story. I'll throw myself under the bus. We shot this thing, and the craft services is first of all the fact that they even have craft services in a post-COVID world, and the fact that we've been able to find a way to keep this machine moving is no small feat, and I truly appreciate everyone that's on the crew. However, the coffee on this particular shoot was shit. And I don't ask for much, but I would like to have a good cup of coffee in the first part of the morning.
You're definitely coming across as the hero of this story already. It's
100%
great. It's going great.
I was.
I'm a shithead about coffee too.
Here's what I did. I ended up going and I got an espresso machine, and they were kind enough to provide a room for me on set. And so I kept that tucked in there. So I would go in there, and then for all my co-stars, I was like, I would come in and I love hosting. It's like one of the things that I love to do. And so I'd come on set and they'd be like, oh, thank you so much. And I would make everybody coffee. That's it. Again, it's smart. But that's where the like GTA hitting, $100 million or $200 million. Pretty.
An espresso machine.
They had to give me an espresso machine for the game that I'm absolutely not in. Never done any of them.
Sorry, you. What was the question you asked?
The question was
salaries.
Yeah, what
Salaries.
if I
Is it
say
salaries?
Grand Theft Auto cost $500 million to make? What is that cost? What is
So
it?
it's a lot like it's like the film industry to the extent that most of the time when you hear a number thrown around, it's referring specifically to the cost of the development of the game, not the marketing. So it's that classic thing of if you
I'm
want to know
asking
if a
it
film's
because,
been
like,
profitable,
with film, at least I understand that they have to like rent shit, like
build
when video,
sets and
video
all that.
games are fake. We're making all of it. All of it is made
you
up.
still have to
Alanah,
make that shit though. There's
right,
a hard
right,
cost
right.
associated with it,
But
right?
it's
I feel like you may be
I'm
accidentally
going to just quickly
revealing.
answer it for you, Alanah. Yes, it's mostly salaries.
Thank you.
Is that true?
You're welcome.
Well, I
Yes,
feel like
100%.
Alanah, you may
But
be
I will-
accidentally revealing that you're not actually being paid, and I feel like you ought to. I feel like you ought to.
I am.
rectify that.
I'm
They tell
being
you they
paid
couldn't afford you because of the studio.
to make fake things.
They're like, this room is
But
so expensive.
hold on
Troy.
a second.
actually my
That is
one-year
a
anniversary
That is a very loose term. To say that it's fake, the fact that
Virtual.
so
That's all I mean.
So
It's
is
the
I
meta-
don't
It's
mean
the
fake.
metaverse,
I don't mean
okay?
fake in any disparaging way. It's just
We want to share this show to it. We're going to sell this show to investors. It's called the metaverse. We're talking about developing the metaverse.
NFTs, and
Our
they're all
value
just
as a
weird
team just
monkeys.
went up by like $10 million.
Hi.
By saying
Ugh, creepy
welcome
Mark
to the
Zuckerberg.
metaverse.
So the reason why I push back on that is because there is a cost associated. While they may be salaries, first of all, I love that they were able to employ people, but it's not like the fat cats like Mike Bithell, Moneybags Mike, that's getting made. It's the fact that there are, hey, we need for the game that we're trying to make, we're going to need to grow and we're going to need to expand. We're going to need to add more animators. We're going to need to add more, all of these people. And those people are making something. They're not carpenters that are building a set, but they're still building something.
Yeah.
And there's a cost associated with that. So while you may be going to salaries, that's also going to building tech, building the machine, building assets.
But the way that you pay for that is through salaries.
Yeah.
I
but
think
not
that's
paying
all
for
I
raw
mean. It's
materials so much,
exactly.
yeah.
I think that's my point. It's like you're not just like buying a physical thing unless it's an engine, which in theory even that is often salaried because somebody's made to build it. I think there
Or
are some.
maintain
The
it
budget
or-
to our latest game and give you a percentage, Alanah,
Yes,
of what
thank
the
you.
costs of
I
the
think
software is.
it's worth pointing
I'm
out
100%
that
doing this right now.
That's cool. I like that.
the business model is super different from films to games since the big movie studios don't really make movies anymore. They're distributors, the movie.
You're right. They're just
publishers.
publishers. Yeah.
Yeah. So every movie, every feature film that I've been hired on, with almost no exceptions, when you look at the paperwork of who I'm technically making my deal with, it's usually like whatever the movie's name is, one shot like the movie LLC or whatever. They set up a company that's a production company, a one-off. They raise the money. It goes into the accounts of that movie. And then they pay, and therefore every single person who works on that film is a freelance contractor. There's no salaried employees of any kind. So all the actors, all the set, crew and camera operators and the cinematographer and the lighting people and the grip and the production sound and the post sound and the composer. And
Everybody
anyone
has a
the composer
rate.
hires. Yeah, they have rates, whether it's day rates or weekly rates or all-in deals or, points plus this, blah, blah, blah. Everybody negotiates what they are. And then it's all bundled up with that one company. And the goal is definitely not to make that company, live on forever and ever in the way that
solvent
game
till
company,
they wrap.
Yeah, like
Well, specifically, you don't want it to because the whole point is liability and tax, right? That you're going
Right.
to
Yeah.
You're going to close that entity the second you can, so you avoid all
Whereas
that nonsense.
games don't really work like
Nonsense.
that at all.
They're having to
Well, that's
pay
what
for
I
the
mean.
things
Is
that
like
you do.
I feel like I have a very good understanding of how it works in film, and less of an understanding of how it works in games. Even though I've been working in games for 10
So I
years
can
and
answer
not
your
film.
question. I literally just looked at the budget for the next big game we're making.
Great.
And it comes
Everybody
in...
zoom in on
so
Mike's eyes, see if you can see the reflection. What is it?
There's no way my signal's good enough that that's a problem. So it's... So we break it down. We obviously have a MISC category, which kind of covers some of our expenses.
Espresso machines.
The main one is software, servers, cloud stuff, all of that stuff. Is in the...
Servers, yes, I hadn't considered that. That's a non-salaried expense.
What is that?
Yeah, so those
Servers.
are kind of the non-salaried expense, and those are that number's in for a project for a team like us that's tens of thousands of dollars. You can assume that for a AAA that's in the hundreds of thousands. But yes, compared to the overall budget for that project, it's about 2.5% of our overall development budget is spent on the software. There's some massive caveats here that need to be considered. One is we all work from home, so we're not paying for office space, which would be a big cost. We're not paying for that at all. The other thing is that the games industry often builds. So the industry is built around a concept called most studios call them man months. We call them dev months because we're, pretentious. But man months is the general term in the industry, and that is essentially how much it costs for one person.
Women months?
Well, that's why we call them dev months, Alanah, because we're a different kind of studio and all that bullshit.
Because we're better.
But yeah, no, it's a weirdly outdated term.
It is
right?
kind of
Stands
outdated,
out.
yeah.
You could
Yeah,
but I get
call
it. Man hours, I get
labor
it.
months,
Yeah,
right?
I get it.
Still
So it's
call it
man-
horsepower too. So let's.
So when you're budgeting, that's
Horse
right.
months.
So when
There
you're
you go.
That's true.
so
How
when
many
you
horse months
stupid.
can this company go for?
So when you're budgeting a game, or you're asking someone for money or whatever, you're basically one of the first questions a publisher will ask is, "What's your man month?" Like how, and they mean how much does that cost? And the man month in
It's
the games
basically the
industry,
burn rate for
Sorry.
the whole.
Are they asking you that?
so that's how much it
a month
costs for
costs?
how much one person for a month on average at your company costs.
the mean average.
That's
of
from that.
a
So you can
person.
say, "Oh, we've got a team of 20 people and we're working for 5 years." You can do the maths and you can work out.
I have
basically
no idea
from
what that is at SMS.
But what's crucial, so SMS would probably be quite high for the reason I'm about to say, which is that is the unit that we use as an industry, but that unit isn't just salary. We assume it's salary, but actually that man month will factor in salary. It'll factor in America.
Food.
It'll factor in
Garage
health
parking.
insurance and shit like that you guys have to do. It'll have not over here because we have socialized
I
medicine.
pay
It's
for my own
brilliant.
fucking healthcare.
Oh, do you have your own-
$400 a month
Okay.
for healthcare.
It's awesome. I just pay my taxes and then I can go to a hospital. It's brilliant.
I
It's
remember.
socialism, it works. So it's their salary, it's their medical, but it's also their computer, and it's also the IT support that they require, and it's also the software they use. So and then crucially, if you're a developer who is being paid for by someone else, and that's most game studios work essentially are paid by someone else in the world, then also you're factoring in a little bit of profit, and you're factoring in a bit of buffer for when the publisher has a ridiculous request that you have to kind of change something or whatever. So that number gets kind of slowly inflated. So that also can lead to kind of a misleading assumption. So the cost of the budget, I would say, is definitely, I would say, on a game developed from home in the way we do it, at least 90% salaries. But there's a lot of kind of little pockets of money that get kind of pulled off in different directions, so that might not be quite. I would say for us it's probably about 90% salaries. I imagine for a bricks and mortar studio that's much lower. Plus, of course, your man month has to factor in your non-dev staff members. So your big game studios, it's not like everyone in the building is working on the game, right? There's support staff,
we have
HR,
things that I've never seen anywhere I've ever worked. Where
IT.
we have I don't know what her actual title would be, but someone who's effectively a building manager. So she is effectively in
like
charge.
an office manager.
Yeah, an office manager kind of thing where she recently just did a virtual tour for the new hires who haven't been to the office.
That's nice.
And we have also a lot. I think there's one person who just is almost a community manager, but only internally. SMS does a lot of really cool stuff. We have cooking classes that you can take once a week. There's yoga. There's all of this these extra activities that I assume is one person's job to organize, an internal community manager to a company culture person, I would think. And that's
Yeah,
somebody
and they
that
would
still
be
factors
part
into the
of-
development and making everybody happy and, team building.
I don't know Santa Monica Studios' budgeting and legal
but they'd be
department, but I
included in
bet-
theory.
Well, they'd be included, but also I imagine what they would do is when they're explaining to the bosses at Sony Worldwide and their budgeting projects and stuff, they would still use a man month, and that man month will incorporate that cooking class. Basically, every member of staff that's being counted is 1% of the man month that's being asked for is covering that cooking class, right? Like those numbers all blend out. So yeah, we're an industry that talks a lot about salaries, but I think that buries a lot of complexity.
I would like to point out
especially
that
at the AAA end.
as a freelancer, I am offered no cooking class participation, and that's bullshit.
We'll jump on the Zoom. I'll show you how to do an omelette.
Sucks for you. Bear's in every one. Every single one. He comes to all of them.
That bastard.
Just not you.
As a point of reference, interestingly, I remember when the Banner Saga did its Kickstarter, they asked for $100,000 because it was 3 guys who had quit their jobs at BioWare in Austin and wanted to basically just have the most basic money. They were planning on living on their savings, and just using that money to hire some basic, like animation studio and things to help. But Arnie was going to be doing the art. John was the technical director. Alex was the writer. They had what they needed to make the bones of the game, and then just the few disciplines. But for example, that $100K, they were like, Arnie goes, well, look, I've opened GarageBand before. I guess I'll do the music. Like there was no contingency plan. But when the Kickstarter exploded and they ended up raising about $750,000 instead, they approached me and they approached like the Kapow Audio in Australia to do the sound design and stuff. And I remember one of the big questions was, should we voice the game? And now they had been designing it with pretty robust amount of storytelling, and so there's huge amounts of dialogue and on-screen choice pop-ups and stuff. And I remember they ran the numbers at one point and they said, given the number of lines that we have, if we were to voice this game, it would basically be triple the current budget to add that feature.
Damn.
VO is crazy expensive.
Thanks,
So,
Troy.
It depends.
Present company accepted.
It's all that Nespresso.
It depends.
But it's an expensive process.
No,
really
for sure.
is.
Just especially given the sheer volume and the fact that it's not like you just blast through the lines one time. It also onboards an editorial cost. It onboards and
I love that Troy
Unless
is
you do it
trying
in the
to
way
speak
Troy's
on this,
about to
but
explain.
we are
Yeah,
instead
Troy-
speaking on it.
So yeah, what do you guys think of the Game of the Year nominee?
Troy's gonna point out that it doesn't need to be expensive, and he's gonna have some good tips for people who want to work out how to do that.
I don't
Yes.
think that it has to be cost prohibitive. I think it will always be expensive is a matter of perspective, right? For you look at what a studio like Santa Monica spends on toilet paper compared to what Bithell Games spends on toilet paper, and they spend that their toilet paper is expensive.
We get fucking brilliant toilet. What are you talking about?
No,
I'm
they're
not
a
saying
big-
you
they're
don't
not
know
saying
toilet
it's
paper
cheap.
situation.
I'm just saying it's like, wow, that's a lot of money you guys spend on toilet. It's like, well, yeah, we're a much larger studio.
I know I'm an arse, but I'm a comfortable arse.
There we are. So I think that the expense scales. And the difference between adding a voice to something that is just text on screen, it just opens up so many things. Now you're having to do your loc changes, right? You have to localize. So now there's a whole other additional cost. So it's not just like, well, once we add actors in, it's like once you make the design choice to now incorporate and tell your narrative through an actor. Or even through voice, it could be a computer. There's still, even if you just did that, even if you just did Lambs, there would still be a pretty extensive amount of design that would,
Also
inherently charge.
For context, that game also has like 30 characters and stuff. Like it's a huge cast of characters in the Banner Saga. So it wasn't just, a hero protagonist.
Troy could have done 15 of them though.
Yeah.
16.
It's true.
I could have stretched it.
16, you
would've
reckon?
been
Yeah,
like,
you got range. I can make
we could have Mafia 3'd a little while. The other thing that, like, once you start then going into performance capture or any kind of mocap to where now we're capturing body data and we're applying that to a model, you have to assume that there's going to be, let's say you have a cast
I'm
that we
entertained
just
by that sentence. We're capturing body data and we're applying it to a model. I don't know why.
Why is that weird to
I
you?
don't know why. I find that it sounds like a rap lyric.
I'm not even going to try because it'll just be embarrassing for everyone.
I loved the wind up though. We
that?
all leaned in.
You saw
He was
that?
so
That was
ready.
restraint. That was the good angel going.
Austin will give you a beat. It'll be
There's
great.
no way it's going to be
This
good.
amazingly
He's a
one of the
professional.
few things that's not very good at. I must say.
It was either going to be Eminem or not appropriate. So let's give it one of those two things, or more likely snow. For
I was thinking
you 90s
Vanilla
kids.
Ice. Yeah.
Vanilla Ice would have been an upgrade. The thing about performance capture is if you're are you using Face? If you're going to do facial data, now you have to incorporate a company like Faceware that's going to be able to take that data and process that on that model. I'm going to take your data and put it on my model. I can't.
Nice.
I don't even know. It's too
Nice.
weird. It's too abstract for me. But like
So many bad jokes that could be made right now. It's not good.
in a depending upon how many cast members you have, like do you have just a dude and a girl, and it's I just need a male model and a female model, which means I need 2 rigs. Which a rig is basically think of it as like an exoskeleton. It is literally
Coco.
huh?
A Roku? Was it what's the one that people? What's the one with the sensors in it? Is it Rococo? There's a specific. Anyway, don't worry about it,
know.
Carol, please. I apologize.
Coco's Basilisk?
I threw the
That's
whole
a
thing off.
AI theory.
There's a mocap suit with sensors in it. I'm going to look it up. So
Move on, I know is one, but that was like magnetic. But
I think we should move on.
It's not. It has nothing to do with the suit that you're using. It has everything to do with like, hey, this is the exoskeleton of this character that we're going to put our character model on. It's literally the skeleton that moves it. And depending upon the height, depending upon the build, depending upon is it human or is it alien, you might have to have a different rig. That rig can cost upwards of $20,000 per rig. So depending upon how many characters you have, it's a one-time purchase, and you could hopefully duplicate that across multiple characters. But there's still going to be potentially, if you have 5 characters, there could be $100,000 that you spend just on that. Then, on average, if you go to a performance capture stage, you could anticipate, not including actor payments, but just to walk onto that stage and shoot, you're looking at anywhere between $50,000 to $65,000 a day.
Is that for renting it?
That is for walking onto that stage. That's not your own facility. That is going to the reserve, or that's going to Digital Dimension or Digital Domain even. On average, you're going to spend $50,000 to $65,000, and that's going to.
You're already doing this, but I was going to say, you give me a day of The Last of Us that you're shooting for performance purposes. How many people are required to be paid for that day to exist?
How many people are required to be paid for that day to exist?
Yeah, it's a weird question, but you get my intent.
very weird question.
It's like you have every
Because
You
actor.
got a couple of
Like
operators.
how many people are in that
you've got
room that need
But that's
to
not just
be paid
it, though,
that day?
because
actors.
what happens
Well,
is
because then there's all the people
capture-
afterwards. That's why I'm trying to restrict it a little.
It's all of just on that day. You could have upwards of. I was just on a shoot and we had about 40 people on set. So
Of
now
which, how many were actors? Like, is that
of
all
which
crew,
4
basically?
were actors.
Wild.
Troy was 20 of those people.
20 of those people. So you've got your camera department, you have your sound department, you have your mocap department, you have your face department, you have your makeup department, you have multiple people that are doing all of the jobs
People
that are
for
required.
safety, stunts.
If you have a stunt coordinator, like we just did a shoot in London, we had a stunt coordinator, we had a stunt coordinator and a stunt assistant. We also who both of them could double as stunt people. But then you just have all of the people that build your sets, that bring in your props, or are there to make sure that all the markers are in the right place. It takes a big team, even on a small shoot with 2 or 3 actors, which is what we had in London. There were still about 20 people on set.
It's wild, man.
It is wild, and what you have to then do
Why
is
we
go.
don't do mocap.
You look at it and go, can we tell our story in any other way? Do we have to incorporate? Because if we don't, it's far less expensive, but you may not have as immersive of a story. You may not have as gripping of a quote cinematic experience if you don't have that. But yeah, you could be spending on if you were to amortize the cost of taking the data and then quote solving it, which means it's super rough. When they get it, it looks
cleaning
just
it
like a
up.
bunch of bees swarming around a body. And then they take it and they go, that marker right there is his right clavicle. And that's her elbow. And that is her foot. And you solve that data to that rig. Then that gets like a grayscale look. That has to go into the animation pipeline.
Yeah.
Is it the studio's pipeline or is it the mocap studio's pipeline? And if like you're let's say that Mike Bithell decides that he wants to get into performance capture, he may not want to build a animation pipeline that will support, being able to do a full performance capture with the fidelity of something even close to Uncharted 4 or Last of Us 2. He may just want to outsource all of that. Even on a game like Shadow of War, we had our pipeline internal to Monolith. There was another studio in Canada that was handling a whole section of the cinematics that their pipeline was handling. And then there was the pipeline at the studio, at the performance capture studio that we were doing it. And then once you, the beauty of Sony studios is they go all hands on deck. There's just like a hub of workers that depending upon where studios are in their development, they can start recruiting from outside people. So it's not just people within Sony Santa Monica or Naughty Dog or Insomniac or whatever. They're recruiting from a bunch of people. So it's super hard to say what is the cost of doing performance capture.
But essentially what you're saying is one day can require 40 people, all of whom have to be experts in one specific thing, which means salaries come with that. Correct. So yeah,
and that's
one
why
day
salaries
is
are
fucking
still
expensive.
But if you look at it proportionately to the people that will actually spend an exorbitant amount of money, say upwards of $3 to $5 million just on shooting their cinematics, that will be a smaller percentage of their budget.
It shows you how nonlinear it is, though, that, it's like a text-based game. You can find ways to kind of gradually increase the cost by longer development cycle or whatever.
Sure.
But then as soon as you crack the seal on, okay, we need a lot of voiceover and voice performance and all that, it doesn't really expand linearly. You kind of just have this big upward thing, and then that can start to grow linearly. But then once you add performance capture, it's an even bigger sort of straight up thing, and budgets don't really move along a straight line that way. Once you onboard a certain
and that's what
thing,
creates that kind of gaps I'm talking about of like the scale of
the sort of like
investment.
It's interesting
stratigraphy
because
of
you can have a game that doesn't have any actual actors, like just text-based, that can still be extremely emotional and impactful.
Yeah,
100%.
Still win
my
game
whole
of the
career.
year.
My whole career is based on the truth of that statement.
That's true.
I was going to say, like me and Austin have both done pretty well out of that assumption.
Yeah, you've got Thomas Was Alone, you got Journey, you have Inside, you have all of this.
The industry does fixate a little bit on the idea that if we spend more money, then we'll achieve greater art. If you look at on a lot of levels, like on lots of fronts, like we definitely equate AAA budgets with better art.
I apologize. I had to duck out. I'll be right back. I'm not going to. I just had to go downstairs. Be right back.
Yeah. Players don't. Players are smarter than that. But like, there's always that weird conversation, especially around awards season, of like when you see AAA games like up for awards in like art direction or story, and you're like,
it is also a thing that seems
the Oscars are always the same as well.
Oh, I was going to say it wasn't. I was going to
yeah.
say I feel like it makes headlines when a video game is really expensive, but I feel like I don't see as many headlines when a movie's really expensive.
That's because we grew out of the tech industry where that number was where it was that thing. It's also insecurity. So much of this, I feel, is like we're still as an industry trying to convince our parents
100% that we're Hollywood
it's all the
too.
time.
100%. I'm so sick
Hollywood
of it. I'm
too.
so sick of it.
Hollywood.
We're cooler.
You talk to
Fuck
Hollywood people, and you know what? Even like the suits in Hollywood think we're cooler on a lot of levels. Like you talk to a lot of the people working in that space.
I did it
and they
just
see
the
games
other
as-
day. I was talking to somebody who works pretty high up in the entertainment or that side of the entertainment industry, and they were talking about wanting to get a specific IP for video games. They were like, we're trying to buy this IP to make a game out of it because it'd be incredible, no doubt. And I was like, disagree, but I'm not going to tell you that wouldn't work. But it was like they were so like convinced this is how you make money. Video games. We have to make a video game. That's how we're gonna make. We're gonna buy all these IPs. We're gonna make games. They have no knowledge of how they're going to do it. But
you have got to tell me this full story off air because I want to hear. I love those people. I find those people at parties.
I mean, I can tell you that I don't mind telling you that the IP, because I'm not revealing any connections to anything, is that Percy Jackson was what they wanted. They were like, we're positive it's got to be Percy Jackson. And I was like, I'm not,
very 2002
I'm not sure
of them,
about that. I don't know, but I didn't say
Percy
that.
Jackson, that's what the kids love, right? Percy
That
Jackson,
was the logic. The kids love it. It'll be the next
like-
Minecraft. It was
so-
like, not
That's
quite.
so funny.
Percy
Not quite.
Jackson.
I just watched
the failed movie franchise. Percy
Yes.
Jackson.
I just watched the recently I realized I had missed one of those Screen Rant pitch meeting videos with the guy on.
Oh, he's funny.
On the pitch, it was the pitch for the sequel to Percy Jackson, and it starts off with him saying like, "I've got a great idea. We're gonna do a sequel to Percy Jackson." He goes, "Oh yeah, I kind of remember that. It was successful, right?" And he's like, "I guess." Anyway, moving on.
Yeah. God, he's so good.
They really are.
They're
I love them
brilliant.
so much.
But yeah, you are right.
We
Like, I feel like internally, a lot of the games industry wants to be Hollywood, and it drives me nuts. But then Hollywood's looking at us and being like, money? You have a lot of money, right? It's true.
But a lot of that will be, like you say, the fact that we emphasize money in our
We focus on it,
storytelling
yeah.
of our industry.
Yeah.
We focus on it, so that creates. It's the same thing you see with the number of people I have to explain NFTs to now on like a weekly basis, because everyone's seeing all the stories about, oh, if you get into NFTs, you're going to make loads of money. It's like, no, you're really not.
Yeah.
It's okay. Let me walk that through for you.
For the record, also just to clarify, when I said it's always like that at the Oscars, what I specifically meant was that it wasn't so much about budget, but the big blockbustery, showy things that just take a lot to get off the ground. They invariably get all the sound design, sound mix, visual effects type Oscar
and costuming
nominations.
sometimes too.
Yeah, it's like a period drama. A Jane Austen adaptation is all but guaranteed an Oscar nomination for costume, because there's just this baked in assumption on the part of, like, oh well, that must have been a big focus of their filmmaking, because it's a period film.
And to an extent, fair enough, right? Like, I think awards, we've talked about award ceremonies too much on this show, but like I do like awards are largely for the culture rather than the individual. So you know what? If a bunch of people loved a specific video game, it should get a bunch of awards. That's awesome. Like, I'm not like knocking it. It's just, there is a presumption that if you don't have mocap, or you don't have high res kind of characters, or you don't have this, or you don't have that you can't tell a story. And I hear all those arguments because people always reply to them with Thomas Was Alone. So I see it in my feed every single day.
Yeah.
Because there are these games, Thomas Was Alone, Journey.
I mean, I understand.
Journey was actually all Troy as performance capture on the Red
Just
Road
one
character.
espresso machine.
There's a brilliant video I made with a mocap studio. Have you seen that? Like, we did an April Fool's Day video with the
Really?
guy. He's like the mocap guy for Iron Man. It's like him in a box with mocap sensors, and we synced it all up to the
I
footage.
didn't know that. That's cool.
That's fun.
I do have a question, if I may interject, because Mike, you seem like you're vehemently opposed to doing any kind of performance capture. Why not? If it's Oh, okay.
It's really expensive. Because it's really expensive. I'm not against it. It's for the exact reason you're saying, is like, for the numbers that come up when you look at doing it in the kind of professionalized context you're talking about, so a proper studio with proper team and all that, the numbers are so high that the scale of game I would have to make so that wasn't a ridiculous proportion of our budget.
Right.
We as a studio are not kind of set up to make those kind of scale of games. So it wouldn't we'd be making a game where it was like, quarter of the budget was spent on performance capture, which is ridiculous unless you're making a Quantic Dream game, right? Like, unless you're making something where that is the focus, it doesn't make sense. What does appeal to me is stuff like, and I looked it up, it is Rococo, where it is these kind of personal suits where you can do it much more ad hoc, and there's some interesting stuff being done with that gear. I've seen there are other indies who are doing mocap, but they're doing it in their living room with essentially by strapping Wii remotes to themselves and getting into it.
By the way,
there's going
to be so many people that just do not like this statement, but I am for this industry moving forward. It doesn't have to bend to my will, nor does it have to appeal to my sensibilities, nor does it has to agree with my principles. It doesn't. I want this. I believe in this industry as a whole, and that means if it takes like. What
But I'm not vehemently against it. To be clear. Like,
that's fair. Because I want
great work's done in the field. I just can't afford it.
Because I do think that at some point it's like, that's not a Bithell game, right? You would have to.
You.
Well, know what I mean?
In a box.
I can speak to that. I remember when we were working on Journey, TGC was coming off of Flower and before that Flow, and I remember. This didn't last long, but there was a brief conversation about midway through when I started talking about scheduling orchestra sessions, where they go, would a live orchestra kind of pull us out of our indie street cred? We're the hip kids that made Flower, disruptor types. does it kind of mainstreamize us? Are we playing with house money now? Like there was a little bit. It didn't last long because I was like, guys, just listen to the difference. I'm sorry. Do you want it to be good or do you want to cling to this very odd sense of what's hip?
But what an interesting stigma to be up against. I totally get that.
But that's when you ask, like, would performance capture suddenly take away the Bithelness? Would it chip away at the Bithelness potentially?
I mean, for a start, we don't have any indie street cred as a studio. Like, we're not in that kind of indie clique.
You're not Lucas Pope. You're not.
Yeah, we're not that kind of studio.
Petri
and
Puro.
that's cool. I've made my peace with that. No, it's that's not who we are as a studio. So I don't think there's necessarily. I think people just want us to make good games. Ultimately, I think the reality is, and this is something I have to think about a lot across all fields of game. I've literally had a conversation with someone about this today at length. It was an hour and a half long meeting on this exact subject. Is at my scale, it's all about. The most important thing is what the player sees, whatever's in front of the player. Like, how it's achieved ultimately doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter how beautiful the back of a painting is when you hang it on the wall. Like, Steve Jobs famously made sure the insides of his computers looked brilliant because he was crazy. That's fine. But, like, ultimately, in my opinion, like, it's about you want to put the value and the money where the audience is going to see it. And that's ultimately the best value. I think the reality is, to the average player, they don't notice that our games don't have mocap in. Like, I think, and ironically, a lot of them do, but they have off-the-shelf mocap. Volume I still point to that with the team a little bit, because that game's entire animation, I think minus 2 or 3 special cases and a cutscene, the gameplay animation is all off-the-shelf mocap data we bought for about $100.
I didn't know you could do that.
Sure.
Oh.
It's better. You can now, and I do, go on websites which have thousands of free. Troy doesn't like this.
I just disagree with it. It's like, you can't say it's better. You could say it's just something that is a different solution.
I'm not saying it's better than any. I'm saying it's better than $100. I'm saying now it's free. That's better. I'm not saying it's better than an actual performance from an actor for a role. But you can do that.
But seriously, how useless are actors?
Yeah.
Some of them.
They're not, and that's definitely not what I'm saying. Like, to be clear, like, but there are unless your game is benefiting from Troy's performance,
right,
in a mocap suit, then if the player doesn't notice Troy's performance because it's a character that big,
absolutely,
X away from the camera, you
mocap the Grenadiers in Command and Conquer.
It's like it's ego. It's like if Austin went to Abbey Road to record someone playing a flute. And it's like, well, you could have recorded this person playing flute anywhere in the world.
Sounds so good, though.
It would have to be fantastic.
To be fair,
like, otherwise it's ego, right? You're going in there because you want to say you did.
I'm going to step on you, Austin, because I would love to throw in something I think you may point to. Depending on who the flautist is, I said flautist.
You bastard. They don't play the flout. They're a flutist.
Is it a flutist?
They do play the flute.
The flout.
A flautist plays the flute.
No, a flutist plays the flute.
I thought it was called a flautist. Anyway.
It is, but that's stupid.
I agree, but I was still trying to play by the rules.
Spicy composer takes.
So
Austin's excited by where the music industry can go, Troy.
Likewise, I'm not a pianist. I'm a pianist.
So if I told you, is like, hey, we're going to record this.
I think you're a pianist.
Yeah, you're a pianist, man.
We're going to record this flutist at Abbey Road. You're like, pretentious. Yeah. How dare you? Just spending money because you can. You're like, okay, well, hold on. This flutist is local to London. And even though we're based in the States, it could be far more expensive to record at any studio in the States. So everything is contextualized.
In that situation, it is contextualized. And in that specific context where it made sense, yes, of course it would make sense.
But that's what I'm saying. There is no standard. You can't standardize the way that games are made because everyone is different.
Yeah.
Every studio functions differently.
I'm not trying to, but I'm saying that people should.
It's a bigger argument though. Standardizing.
Sorry?
It's a much bigger argument though when you start talking about standardizing games.
What did I say?
No.
I feel like I'm
saying it.
I didn't mention standardization. That's all.
I'm just saying.
No, you didn't.
Did you?
Okay, carry on, Troy. Sorry, argue
my own point.
It is specific, but my point is, I think to answer your question completely honestly, the reason I don't do mocap is because for the money it costs, my players wouldn't notice that I'd done it. And that's
because
of
the kind of games that you make.
Bingo.
Because of the kind of games we
Yeah.
make, but also because our games do have. So, for example, Subsurface Circular is a game about a bunch of robots sat on a train talking to each other, and they're kind of being shook around by the train. I paid an animator to make me a bunch of one-frame poses of the robots sat in various positions. All the motion in that game is me using essentially some very rudimentary physics just to bounce them around a bit with the movement of the train. And I've seen people in reviews talk about how weirdly good the animation is for such a simple game. It's that kind of thing where, like, that's a path. That was a job that took me an afternoon and created the illusion that we'd actually like done very expensive animation in that place.
We'd have a
At
lot of
my
trouble if
scale-
we didn't have mocap, because we're trying to make something that looks realistic. And
Right, but
there
I
are
bet you're
so
not
many
using
moving
mocap
pieces.
for everything, are you?
I don't know.
You're not using
I
mocap for
assume
like
not.
your core gameplay. I assume you're doing a lot of. If you are using mocap as a starting point, you're still doing a lot of keyframe to make
Yes,
that work.
yes.
Sure,
there
you're
are
always
definitely
gonna touch it.
also keyframes. Yes.
But it has gotten to the point where it's like, hey, we need you to. I did an entire day. They called it dance cards, and it's an entire day where you go. I need you to walk here. I need you to walk at a 45. I want you to walk at a 90. I need you to walk at a 135. So it's because what they don't want there to be is for someone to use stock animation for my character walking, and then all of a sudden I walk in. Most people, you're right, will never be able to go, they use stock animation. They probably went to stockanimation.com and bought that, $8.99 bundle for that. They're just going to feel it. And that's
Well, so we have a word for that, which is the fancy sofa. You're the fancy sofa in that. If you have an apartment and you've not got much money, you've filled it with like the cheapest shit you can find, like all of us did our first apartment.
But you have a
and
fancy
then for
sofa.
whatever reason, you have like a really wealthy uncle, and they're like, "I'm going to get you the best chair in the
My
world." And they
fancy
buy you
sofa
this
arrives
extravagant.
next week. I'm really excited about it.
hell yeah, dude.
That's awesome, and I'm sure your place is beautifully decorated. This is not a
not.
criticism of you personally.
No, everything else is IKEA.
When
Mike,
you
you're right.
buy, if you put a luxurious antique sofa in the middle of an apartment which is decked out in like standard kind of cheap stuff, the cheap stuff will look cheaper because now you've got that fancy sofa. That's what you're describing, Troy, is my stock mocap data doesn't look bad until I put the fancy sofa that is Troy in a cutscene, because now suddenly there's that disjoint. You can shine. It's horror movies. A monster in a movie looks awesome right until you shine a bright light on it, and then it looks bad and you've ruined the movie.
Sure,
so
but there's a
definitely at my
difference.
scale with limited budgets, we have to work out where we shine those lights and what we focus on.
I could also say if you took a standard stock London flat New York apartment, whatever, that was just a studio apartment, brick walls, and you left it bare floor and bare walls, or maybe you put up a painting or whatever and a lamp, and you put a really, really nice piece of furniture, it elevates the room. It doesn't. You don't all of a sudden realize the discrepancies between. It's like, oh, well, that's not really the best brick.
I love the idea of us getting really hard into interior design here as the tangent.
Here's how it
No,
applies.
the thing is,
I
Troy, you're
understand, I
absolutely
understand.
right. Like, you're absolutely right. Your metaphor holds as well. I would argue if that sofa was wonderful and expensive, and then you turned around and then you turned back and it was a shit plank of wood on 2 breeze blocks.
For
and then you turned
sure.
away,
Right.
and then you look back and
Right.
it was a sofa.
But, like, if
That's-
somebody
my
brings-
metaphor doesn't completely hold.
But what if you're, like,
you can't put good next to awful and
But
expect
it would
not
be
to
noticeable
highlight the problem.
if you
No,
sat
but
down
I
to
go
dinner
ahead.
with somebody. Well, I think I can make a better analogy.
I think
If you sat down to dinner with somebody and in that same really like low rent apartment, there's no frills anywhere, there's water stains, and everything feels like it's crumbling apart, and you're eating off of an old card table you found on the street, but they serve you dinner with like $1,000 plates.
That's different.
It would actually make you more aware of the rest. For me, it would be like, this is like, I would immediately have questions. I would immediately
right,
go, okay,
but that's a
someone gave you
disproportionate
this?
thing.
Or,
That's my point, is you are disproportionately better than a stock animation.
However, I can think that yes.
I am. Yes,
Thank you. But I do believe it's like all we can do is this, all we can do in this, but we're choosing to spend our money in this because we believe this will elevate. Perfect example is the shoot that we just did. Small cast, we came in, the story is simple. The game mechanics are nothing that are like, holy crap, they're just really, really, they're well done, but they're simple. We know they knew what kind of game we're making. We knew what kind of game we're walking into. And he was like, here's what I really need. This is really about, can I get you to care about these 3 people? In order to do that, I really need good performances out of people. So we got 3 great actors together and we workshopped those scenes and we elevated them. What really elevated was getting there on the day and going, here's some couple of fight sequences that we need. We really need to spend the money on a stunt coordinator and a fight choreographer to come in and turn these really, really simple moments, just like, oh no, this is just the scene where he does the thing, into these big set pieces that we did on the stage. So that to me is a fancy sofa. Like you brought in a fancy sofa to this.
No, that's a nice throw over the fancy sofa, is my point. In terms of scale,
I can't keep up with your
difference-
metaphor. Your metaphor.
I think 12 minutes is
I'm
a
not
good
arguing against
example
you, I
of
guess
what
is
we're
my
talking
point, Troy.
about.
I do agree with everything you're saying.
Wait a minute.
Like everything you're saying.
Yes.
12 minutes.
12 minutes is a fantastic.
So there
you
are
could have
parts
done that with
that are,
anybody.
There are parts that are mocapped, even outside of the actors. Obviously, there are parts that are mocapped where they kiss at the start of the loop. It's mocapped that they hug each other. But then there are stiff animations for when they like walk away from each other. So
Or they jerk between
yeah,
their
or they
mocap
just like
data.
like there are interruptions that makes the inclusion of the smooth mocap seem out of place as opposed
That's
to
what I'm
elevating
saying.
it.
I got you.
No one thinks that playing like you've never thought about the quality of the animation in Among Us or in the animation in like most indie games. It's because that thing is very elevated. When that mocap thing works, it's beautiful.
Sure.
And what do I see in all the reviews of 12 minutes is the animation sucks. And the animation
Right.
sucks because some of it's really fucking good.
But they
and
made
that
it-
makes an issue.
It lacks cohesion because it has two different styles. It feels weirder that some of it's really good and some of it's not.
Another example is Advanced Warfare.
Consistency.
You got Kevin Spacey, you got his likeness, and you spent so much time on the fidelity, especially for that time to be, holy crap, it was 1-to-1. But then you go literally talking about turning to the left and going out of that cinematic, you're like, shit, all of you look terrible because there was such a discrepancy between the game model. I would much rather
That's like the
You went
90s,
so Jeff
the-
Goldblum there. That was amazing.
I would
That was
rather-
like
Terrible.
I remember that feeling so strongly in the
you could do it.
in the 90s when like the Star Wars Jedi Knight or Dark Forces 2 had all the FMV cutscenes where you'd like a dark Jedi would come out and it was clearly an actor shot on a green screen, and then the cutscene would end and this incredibly low poly version of them would be in that position on the screen, and it was just like this horrible. Even then, as future tech as they were hoping to convince us the FMV was, it just showed how far we had to come.
Yeah.
And actually, it's funny. I was wanting to interject and ask a peripheral question, and you teed it up amazingly, Troy. Of because I just finished playing the campaign of Call of Duty Vanguard, and
so I can't wait.
it's really fun. It's they never fail to impress with the set piece kind of like spectacles. It's just pretty astounding, and the amount of craziness that they can jam in. But it's interesting because we're so accustomed to this art form of acting in games, especially performance capture, being the kind of thing where the gulf between who the character is and the actor is can be as wide as the imagination. Whereas a film, a person appearing on camera, other than occasionally, obviously elaborate prosthetic makeups and things like that, generally speaking, it's DiCaprio playing such and such. And so the result of which is, I couldn't decide if I was on board with Laura Bailey's likeness being so spot on, because I was like, I feel like I've been trained to expect something different for the last few decades, and it's so noticeably her. And Dominic Monaghan is also in the cast, and it was like, that's a Hobbit, and like it was a fascinating thing I hadn't found myself thinking about much, because obviously the characters that you're most associated with are not your facial likeness,
Right?
And I just found myself going, are we moving in that direction? That's going to be the norm more and more, that it's them as them, or do we lean into the fact that it doesn't have to be them?
This
like Laura,
this is one of the reasons why I love this industry. I've talked
and
about
to be
her.
clear, Laura's very good.
She's
in the
fantastic.
game. Like,
She's always good.
she's basically
always good,
she's basically Jude Law's character in Enemy at the Gates. The Russian sniper.
Great pull.
I'm sold. I love that movie.
I have a wonderful team, and headed up by my agent Natanya, and who for some
Was
reason
also a
awesome.
sniper at Stalingrad.
so weird.
I'm convinced his agent is Famke Janssen's character from GoldenEye.
We have these conversations a lot where it's like, hey, we want to do this project, and it may be something that we haven't done before, or it's a character we haven't done before, or it's a studio we haven't worked with, or something novel about it, or something that's compelling beyond just the paycheck. The one question that they have, or that has become a factor now, is likeness. And it's like, man, we're already trying to make sure that, you're hearing somebody drill, by the way.
I can hear it.
Yep. Have to listen.
Get ready, guys. It's fun owning a home. It
I'll
really,
be through
really
in a
is.
minute. I'll be through in a minute.
They're sorry. Oh my God, they're fixing shit.
Fell.
Cool.
Man, my ADD is going crazy right now.
So
The ability to add into a component of a likeness to where it's already me, it's something that I've had to, fight against, because people are like, he's in every game. It's like, well, there's a whole other layer that we have to take away if it's going to be my face. So I'm very cognizant of that. And there may be times it's like, yeah, we want it to be my face, like Death Stranding. It's like, it's going to be everybody else. It would be weird if it wasn't me. But let's not make that in this other game that we just did, it was like, let's not make it me, so that it doesn't have to be it doesn't have to be me in that game, and maybe people can just see the character. That's something that this specific industry affords me that, not everyone else gets. So
You
think that-
might be able to work
financial
less
aspect,
if you have
right?
to have your likeness
right.
in everything.
but that's
There's a
why I
financial
was
aspect
curious.
in that they're negotiated separately as well. So there's actually weirdly a strange incentive for you to keep your face as like a limited asset, right? Like if your face is in everything, that lowers its value in a weird, like from a financial point of view.
So even I have
because you negotiate separately for facial likeness. If I wanted Troy in my game to do voice, or I wanted to do voice and have his face in there, I would be expected to pay more.
There would be a
his face, to
separate
have his likeness. There would
conversation
be a
based
separate
upon that.
conversation,
Yeah, even
right?
I have
Yeah.
some really interesting likeness stuff sometimes if I do like a brand deal or any like influencer stuff where they'll be like, and we want likeness, and I'm always like, whatever. And my manager is always like, absolutely not. It doesn't mean anything to me, but I guess on paper, if I do a brand deal with a certain company and they ask to be able to like use my image, then they can use it for the rest of time on whatever they want. And I would not have known that without him. That I'm like, whatever, you can post a picture of me on your website, I don't give a fuck. That's fine. He's like, no.
Also,
they
it's
can't.
another negotiation point, right? If they want you, like
He just flat says no.
capitalism
He's
101,
like,
right?
it's not
If they
happening.
want it, okay. But if they want it, then they pay for it. So you could if you chose to, if you wanted that, you could negotiate, and that could become part of the negotiation. Either you pay more or you get a different kind of rights than you'd expect or whatever. Like,
In theory,
it's a weird one. It's,
we've
certainly run into that conversation before because we've got games with likenesses. Ian and Lance are both in John Wick.
You literally have my face.
Your literal face.
You
is in
literally
Neo
have
in,
me.
Solitaire.
Well, in Cyberpunk, it's very
So,
obviously.
It
I
is
will
me in
use that
Cyberpunk
face
as well.
in every single work. I'll wrap that to models. You'll be seeing Alanah
I don't remember
walk
what I
past in the
signed.
background of my games forever.
Do whatever you want.
I don't know what's going on with Troy.
He's moving his desk. He's got a
Dude,
standing desk.
I started looking at it, I was like, my desk is going askew, and it was the one side, and now it's the other. And I literally am watching as it just goes like this. You kind of see it like,
drifting down.
I look like I'm in a villain's
Yeah, one
lair
of my
in 66 Batman.
Was it like your standing desks, like the pressure?
It's my
bar or
standing
something,
desk, but
or-
for some reason it's doing that. So I'm like, this, and I have computers and shit on this. My PS5's on that side. It's just fucking. I gotta go anyway. I gotta
Same.
fly to
I
London.
also have to run. You going back to London again?
Yeah.
Oh my God.
So I'll be.
It was
by,
nice
by
seeing
the
you
time
this
you watch
weekend.
this,
We saw each
I'll
other
be
in
London.
person, Mike.
I know.
It was great.
That was a good.
Well,
hang.
when are you in London?
I will be there.
We can arrange this offline.
Yeah.
The audience doesn't need to listen to
I'll
this.
meet you in the pub on the corner of.
That'd actually be a lot of fun. That'd be super fun. We can continue this and kind of like, wait a minute, why don't you not like actors, Mike Bithell? God damn it.
For the record, I like actors. I love Troy.
They just don't
Baker.
offer anything
And
that
his
you can't
face.
be offered by 99-cent stock
Yeah.
animations.
That is not what I said, and I encourage listeners to go back. and
I
listen to that
encourage
podcast.
Mike and all
Leave
the
it- leave it
developers
in the
to save that
comments,
money
everybody.
and put it into the music budget.
Alana, will you do the
Thank
thing?
you for listening to Play Watch Listen, everybody. I'm Alanah Pearce. I'm a video game writer. That's Mike Bithell. He's a video game director. That's Troy Baker. He's a video game
I
actor.
don't
And
like
that's also
actors.
Witchery. He is a video game composer. We will see you guys next week.
Bye.